In this third and last outage case study, we're going to study an outage of this company known as the Planet. This outage occurred on 31st May 2008, and once again, the information that I'm discussing here is available from the postmortem, which is available at the URL shown on the slide, which is an availabilitydigest.com URL. The Planet at that time, at the time of this outage, was the fourth largest web hosting company, and it supported 22,000 websites. It had 6 data centers at that time, 2 in Houston, 4 in Dallas. This particular outage took down 9,000 servers and 7,500 businesses. The outage started at about 6 p.m. with an explosion in the H1 Houston data center. A short circuit in the transformer set the transformer on fire. Normally, when the transformer goes on fire, the backup power supply, the UPS, kicks in to keep the servers online. However, in this case, the fire in the transformer caused an explosion of battery acid fumes from the UPS backup. So this was a cascading series of failures, physical failures, that caused the power to go out to several of the servers in the data center. Also, because this was fire, real fire here, this blew out 3 walls of the first floor. So this is an example of an outage that actually did not involve human error at all. I mean, you could argue that there was potentially maintenance issues involved here that could have prevented the transformer from catching on fire, but there was no explicit human trigger here that triggered this particular outage. It was really fire in this particular case. So there was an explosion, and this blew out 3 walls of the first floor. Thankfully, no servers were damaged, but 9,000 servers were brought down because essentially they did not have any power source at all to them. And the fire department quickly responded to this, and they evacuated the building for the safety of all the personnel. They also directed that the backup generators could not be turned on because there was a fire hazard. Also, because of the fire hazard, no staff are allowed back in until about 10 p.m. However, there were several services that went offline and several customers who were complaining about their services being offline. And the rumor is that the Planet staff had to physically ship some of the critical servers to some of their other data centers in Houston and in Dallas on their pickup trucks and so on and so forth. Again, this is a rumor; it's unsubstantiated. I do not know whether this is true or not. But of course, they could not transfer all the 9,000 servers affected to the other data center because the other data centers were almost running at the capacity of their power and cooling. So by 5 p.m. June 2nd, power was restored to the second floor, and on June 4th, a couple of days later, the first floor servers were being restored back 1 rack at a time. So this was a very slow, painstakingly slow process of bringing the data center, the affected data center, back online 1 rack at a time. All the while, during this entire outage, the company was very transparent and open with its customers. They provided frequent updates to all its customers at the frequency of 15 minutes to 1 hour per update. And this kept the customers reasonably well informed about what was going on and what was the expected time to recover from the outage. What lessons can we learn from this outage? Well, first, outages will happen. Even if it's not human error, they're going to happen. Fire happens, right? As a customer who's running your service on a data center, you may want to back up not just your data, but also your service across multiple data centers so that there is fault tolerance. So one of the data centers goes down, then the other data center is up and it's able to service at least some of the requests. Entire data centers could go down, entire companies could go down, they could go bankrupt. So you may want to have backups not just across data centers of the same provider, but across data centers of different providers. So for instance, you may want to run one version of your service on Google, on the Google Cloud, another version on Amazon Web Services, and another version on the Microsoft Azure service. These are sometimes known as business continuity plans that ensure that in spite of disasters that happen at these different providers, your service is still up and running all the time. However, running your service on these 3 different providers, like the example that I mentioned with Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure, is easier said than done today. It's very hard because these different cloud providers have very different APIs and very different ways in which they store data. It's an open question about whose responsibility should it be to replicate data and services across different providers. Should it be done by the providers themselves? Perhaps the customers pay some extra insurance money and the providers ensure that the data and services are replicated no matter what. Or should it be done explicitly by the customer? This, of course, is far more painstaking because it involves extra work at the providers, and also because the different providers store data in very different formats. So there's data lock-in at each provider, And when you want to transfer data from one provider to another, you'll need to export the data into a common format and then re-import it back into the destination data center format itself. So the whole problem becomes very challenging because of the lack of standard APIs, and also because of the lack of standard data formats, which leads to data lock-in at individual providers. Okay, so if you go the provider route, this may cause customers more, but it's sort of similar to insurance premiums. Maybe that's the way to go forward. Or maybe customers will start to build their own business continuity plans that cover multiple providers. The next few years will tell us which way the industry is going to go on this particular front.